Any modern website nowadays requires a database. The same goes for CMSs and also other platforms, blogs, e-commerce or anything else. Because database is something that we use to update, to store, to delete the information and fastly search it and make it more automated. For example, if you are running e-commerce, you would need a database where to store all the products that you are selling, easier for you to manage them, to change the prices, change description, change the image. Every data that you change, it is changed inside the database. Even customers who come to your e-commerce, they would need to purchase item, they need to register, and somewhere that data needs to be stored. Nowadays, every e-commerce is more automated. Customers can purchase any item, they can register, and they can make the payment straight away. Therefore, you don't need to invest your manual time in servicing your customers. That's why you need a database. The blogs, the same. If you are running a blog, you will need a database where to store all your blog posts, the information, and let's assume that you found out that you had made mistake writing the text. You can go and easily edit it by the backend. If you wouldn't have a database, then you need to download the file, open the file, change it, and then put it back in. In this video, we are going to install the MySQL on a Linux server and also run it in a Docker. So in this video you will learn how to install it, how to configure it, and basic usage. In future videos we are going to look into how to install also Microsoft SQL, Oracle SQL, MongoDB, PostgreSQL, and other database types, how to work with them, how to configure them, and how to use them. So if you are interested in it, then please subscribe. And also I would like to mention that sometimes we are searching for hosting providers and we think that the large hosting providers are the ones that we need to go for. But that's not the case, because sometimes the hidden jewels can be also found in the small countries. For example, like today's sponsor, Zone.eu. It is a hidden jewel that is located in Estonia. I have used Zone.eu services previously, ordering several domain names, ordering services, and also using their VPS and web hosting, about which I'm going to also create a video in the near future. Zone.eu offers you high quality services for very small prices, and based on my experience, they don't have any limits on bandwidth, on traffic. So I find their services very useful for data transfers and using them to host the web pages, because they have amazing support, real human support who has the knowledge. They don't use AI or chatbot supports, but the real human, which is crucial nowadays, because I have used other hosting providers in several countries and they all use chatbots, and that is very difficult to actually, if you need some changes, to communicate with them. Of course, some VPS providers have the opportunity to do changes online, like Zone.eu also has the opportunity to do the changes using their panel, but some changes cannot be made by you on hand, or something, let's say, broken. You cannot fix it without proper large permissions. That's why you need a real human support, which Zone.eu is giving with their services, and no chatbots. I have used French, German, American hostings, and they all are using chatbots. So when I need to resolve the issue, I cannot get hold of real support, and that actually decreases the time. Because if you are running some website, if you are developing a website, the time is a crucial element for everything. And if your website is down even for 1 to 5 minutes, that already is making you lose money. That's why you need a hosting provider which has 24/7 support, which has a real support human being, not a chatbot, and which has the best quality and people who work in support with the knowledge. So Zone.eu has knowledgeable support, and their service is pretty great. So this video is sponsored by them, and I'm not saying about them only good things because they sponsored this video, but because I have tested their services, I have used them, and I know the quality. And the quality is great for the price that they are offering it. So please check out Zone.eu and find out what you can gain if you click on the link in the description, which contains our referral code, and you get some discounts or some other benefits by using our referral code. So without further ado, let's drink our coffee, as coffee is crucial for our IT, because when you work in IT you need to gain energy, and the best way to gain energy is drinking coffee. So cheers, and let's start installing. So once we have our VPS ordered, set up, or server, or any Linux device, in my case I'm using Zone.eu VPS, and they have, like, after in the preparing of VPS, that happens quickly. Once you do your payment, there are several payment methods. The VPS is ready in just a couple of seconds. The same is for domain names. If you order domain name and pay straight away with a bank card or something else, the domain name is ready in less than 30 minutes. So once our VPS is ready, firstly we need to become a root user. Let's type sudo su. We are a root user. Knowing the Zone.eu, they already have the latest version of Linux upgraded and with the latest repositories. But to confirm that and to show to you, I am running apt.get update and .upgrade to check if they are latest versions. I have no doubt, as you can see, it's all the latest versions. So once we have done that, let's install our MySQL Server. It is pretty easily straightforwarding. MySQL Server. I'm using the -J or Y. Why? Because to not confirm everything manually. There's only one thing to confirm, but anyhow, it's much easier, and I misspelled something. So the MySQL is installed. Once the installation is complete, let's check our MySQL version. But since it's still installing, let's grab a sip of coffee. A sip of coffee. And as you can see, our MySQL is installed and ready. Now let's check our version. We have version 8.0.37. This is currently on this date when I'm filming it. The MySQL versions change because the MySQL organization and the team, they are updating always and fixing bugs and also patching the security vulnerabilities that due to technology changes may appear, because some things that is now secure, after 1 week, 1 month, it can become insecure. Therefore, you always need to follow the latest information on each vendor and also follow YouTube channels to know what's happening. So after the installation, let's do some basic MySQL configuration. Here we will click yes. I will choose a strong password. I will have the strong password. Let's remove the anonymous user as we don't want it. Disallow root login remotely. I will select no because I would like to access this server MySQL remotely from my laptop or from some other host to manage, because I will be creating a cluster video and I will need remote access. So I will use no, and if you are using firewall, then please filter out all the traffic. Remove test database and access, yes, and reload the privileges. We have done a basic configuration. Now, if we do MySQL u root -p, you can see it's asking for a password. And if we just click enter, we are inside the root, and that is not a secure way. So we will gonna change that by executing the following command. The password is blurred out, but about the passwords, I suggest you to choose to use a secure password that contains from 18 to 30 letters, capital, small, including digits and specific characters. The harder password you create, the better it is, the more secure it is. So let's execute it. As you can see, it is done. So let's flush privileges and let's quit our MySQL. we are out. Let's clear this. And now let's log in to our root account. Now the password will be automatically hidden. If I just click enter, you can see I don't have any access. If I enter the password, I have the access. So once we are inside the MySQL, let's create a database called valtersit. And for the database, I would like to use separate user, as that is more secure, because you are putting the password username inside your CMS configuration file, inside some configurations or something else. Therefore, it is not wise to use root, because root has the full access of everything, and if you're containing sensitive data or something else, use separate accounts. So let's input, create a user. This will be valtersit. It can connect from any host. If you're hosting your MySQL on a different server or remotely somewhere, then you need to use this one. But if you're hosting locally on the same server as your MySQL, then you should change it to just local host. The change is pretty easy. You just go to it and click local, type local host. But in my scenario, okay, I will use the %sign. And of course, use the secure password. Again, from 14 to 13 letters, capital, small, mix them with digits, mix them with special characters, and repeat the large and small letters. Not the same letters, but different, but have the capital letters after few of the symbols and digits. And also don't forget the small ones, as more complex password, harder to actually hack you. So we have created the user. Now we're going to grant all privileges to the same newly created user with allowance to connect remotely from any host to valtersit database with all the sub tables. And to apply the changes, flush privileges. It's all done. We have our user. So let's quit, clear. Now, once we have done that, we can log into MySQL with our newly created user by executing following command, MySQL-u valtersit-p. As you can see, it asks for the password. If we click enter, the access is denied. If we type in the password, access is granted. Show tables, or show databases. We can see that we have these databases assigned to our newly created user. This is valtersit, where it has full privileges. These are performance scheme. Those are default MySQL tables and information scheme. These tables doesn't contain any sensitive information. It's only analytical information. This is your table, your database, which contains your data, what you are storing. If you're using CMS, e-commerce, or blog, and if you have some sensitive user data, then it is stored inside here. If you are a developer and you are outsourcing developers, giving them, let's say, this database dump or giving something, don't do that, because if you're, let's say, you're running e-commerce and there are some data of your customer purchases, customer accounts, something like that, and developer runs some test on those, some function, and by accident it sends out the customers the email that their order is on the way or something, and that could actually damage your reputation. That's the first thing. And secondly, if you give this database containing your data to external developer, to outsourcer or something, it will have the whole customer data, including the hashed passwords, etc. Therefore, he can sell it, or by accident upload it somewhere, store it insecurely, or someone can steal from it, and therefore can make you a large expenses with data breaches. So don't give it, keep it secure. So once we have that is clear, we can see we have everything. Let's log out. Let's clear everything, and I think I don't have. So let me upload quickly one test file, SQL dump, that we will be importing. Meanwhile, we need to drink some coffee to keep our energy up. Coffee is the best. Once we have the dump ready, as you can see now I have db1 SQL. Now we will import it. Let's use the new user better. -p. Our database was valtersit. This is where we're gonna to import the file. Now let's use this symbol and db1.sql. In my example, I'm using a old database which was from different project that is dismissed. It was actually for video creating, therefore the database is a bit broken. So I'll use force to force it in. And the password. And as you can see, the database is imported. How I like that Zone.eu has great servers that works very fast and that are very fast network connection. That is adorable when you need to upload something large, download it, or like now import something. So let's go to our MySQL root. Let's use the new user. And once we are in, show database. Says we see valtersit. Let's use valtersit database. Okay, I'm inside the database and show tables. Here are all the tables that was from that project that was created, and let's select the information, for example, from on the table that doesn't contain any sensitive information. Select all. The star means select everything from OC app config. I forgot the ending. So now you can see all the information from the app config table. And let's assume that I want to select information from this table that contains config key install version. So I will gonna do select config key from OC app config, where config key equals let's use the brackets, installed underscore version, and the ending. Basically, we're going to select config keys. This is the row for the config keys from this table, where this config key is equal to installed version. So I have a bit misspelled something. From app config, OC app config. So here are all the installed versions, but it actually doesn't give us anything that we need. Sometimes, yes, there is maybe some changeable variables that you need, but let's select all the information, more information to have it, because sometimes when you're researching something or doing some analytics, you need the information that you can get as much as possible. So as you can see, all these app IDs, these are the apps that was installed, have config key install version, config value, type, and lazy. These are all the structures inside the database table, and they are assigned. So let's assume that I want to find all the apps that are install version and that has 1.19. So let's change this to 1.19.0, where we will change it to config value. And all these app IDs, config key install version, has 1.19. This is how you can search the database. So now let's exit our MySQL. Let's create a MySQL dump. The dump is the backup, or if you want to move to different server, or if you need some backup before some changes or something like that, we will need to execute MySQL dump -u. We'll use root, since our root only has this option. I didn't grant the access to the user, as that would be irresponsible and insecure. valtersit will be our database, and now we need this symbol to push valtersit whole data, structure tables and all that to valtersit backup.sql. Let's enter our password, and as you can see, we have our backup with all the data, everything. And to restore it, you can see the previous step that we did to import the database as restoring is the same process. So, and if we would like now to delete our database, then we need drop database valtersit, and this is how we delete our database. And to recreate it, database valtersit. And if we do flush privileges, it automatically assigns the same privileges that was for valtersit user for the same database. And now let's exit it. So this is how you can do the basic stuff, the configuration, and etc. Now I will show you two more things before we move to the Docker installation, configuration, and usage. Two things that I want to show you is, firstly, where is stored the MySQL information, the configuration file, also where the data is stored that you store in your database, and secondly is how you stop, start, and restart the MySQL database server. But before we move to that, another sip of coffee. So let's clear this one first. All our data is stored into varlib MySQL. This is all our SQL Server database files. They are all encrypted, not encrypted, but well, they're not readable easily. Secondly, where we can change the whole important configuration is etc MySQL, and into MySQL conf d is MySQL tconf file. I'm using Nano editor. You can use what suits you best, Vim, or what is your favorite one. This is the most important MySQL configuration file. If you make some mistake in this file, the MySQL server will not start. I would suggest you, before you start editing this file, just do like so, copy MySQL de into MySQL de, and you can also label your version, let's say 1. You can now add the conf, but you can also skip it. If you skip it, then you will be sure that it is not using wrong configuration. So here you can change all the caching, several projects that are large, indexing folder, indexing database, tables, all the information, and doing some deep search. And the large database, they definitely need the caching. Plus, if you don't need it, then you don't need to enable it, as it uses resources from your VPS and server. If you want remote connection access, then you can disable these parts. If you need some specific configurations, you can do it here. Basically, the configuration is based on what you are using. If you're using WordPress, there's specific configuration. If you're using e-commerce, some CMSs, open source platforms, or custom development, then you need to actually do these kind of changes and add some new values, some new entries that you can find in MySQL website. So since we are just changing to commenting out two things, we anyhow need to restart our MySQL, because any change that you do in this file, afterwards you need to restart your MySQL to like apply the changes. MySQL is restarted. As you can see, we can check status MySQL. We can see that MySQL server is operational. If we want to stop our MySQL, we just type my systemctl stop MySQL, and if we execute the status command, we can see that server shutdown complete. If we want to start MySQL, just change from status or stop to start, and if we do the status, we see the server is operational. So this is how you install MySQL on a Linux, how you can configure it, how you have basic usage, configuration, etc. Now let's move to the Docker part, as Docker part is also interesting. And after the Docker part, I will tell you why Docker can help you, how Docker can benefit you. First thing we need to do is log in into our server as a root. I'm logging in into my Zone.eu server, so I'm using sudo su as to become a root user. I assume you already have your Docker installed. If you don't have, then you can click my YouTube shorts where I show how to install Docker. But let's check. I don't have any running containers. All the commands that I'm currently running will be available down in the description and also in my blog as well. So as you can see, I don't have the image, and Zone.eu is quickly downloading it because they have really great network speed. It's as mentioned before, 1 gigabit per second. So if we now check image, we can see that we have downloaded an image that is created 3 days ago, the MySQL latest version. So now, once we have the image, we should also have the container running, since we used a full container command. And as we can see, we have a container with a name MySQL container using these ports. Those are default MySQL ports, what you are like any system is using basically to connect. And if you are using some of CMS, not CMS, but software, you want to connect to database directly and do some changes, then well, you need these ports. If you change these ports, then also in your CMS, and when you specify your MySQL connection, you need to change those ports as well. If you are using some like DataGrip or some other software to access your database, then you also need to specify the port. We are running the latest image and it's up 26 seconds. So now let's go into our MySQL container, bash, and we are currently now into our MySQL instance. Not MySQL instance, but Docker container. And now let's log in into our MySQL by executing the following command. I'm logging in as root, and -p, as mentioned before, means the password. Once I enter the password, I'm into MySQL. I can check databases. And as you can see, we don't have any customly made database or any like old databases. So let's create a database. Let's create it valtersit. I'm specifying command create database, and valtersit is the database name that we'll be using. We have a custom database created. So let's enter databases, and as we can see, we have the new database valters.it. So now that we have our database created, we would need to also create a user, because using a database with root user is insecure and irresponsible. So now let's create a MySQL user. The password will be blurred out, so I suggest you to choose a safe password from, I say, 14 to 30 digits, including characters, large digits, large alphabetic letters, small letters, and specific characters, and make it from 14 to 30, because that is how you can keep your password more secure. So let's execute it, and as you can see, we have created our new user. Now we need to assign that user to the database, and we are going to grant the full permission to user to access the database and work with it. So let's execute the following command. This means that valtersit, I forgot to mention, the percentage sign means that it can connect from any host, from any device. It is a bit insecure, But if you are using firewall, then you can specify which IP addresses can actually connect to your server, to the specific 3306 port, which is MySQL's default port. In real life scenario, if you are running some website, I would suggest you to use localhost. That means that only this VPS server can only use this username and password to connect to the database. If you are using hosting the CMS, blog or e-commerce on the same VPS or server, then yes, it is useful. But if you're hosting your CMS, WordPress or any other thing that uses the database on different server, then you need to use the %sign. And I suggest you to filter that traffic using your firewall. So we have granted valtersit access to valtersit with all the tables that it will contain. So once we're done, let's apply the privileges. And now we can quit. So let's go back to our Linux. Let's do clear. I have a database here. This is a test database that I created. And let's now copy this database in my scenario to be copied to the Docker folder. My local data. This is where we have mapped our Docker container MySQL folder to the Linux. This all information is containing your MySQL server and your databases. If, for example, your Docker container breaks, then you can also restore all your data. If you haven't linked it, then, well, you have lost all your data. This will be one way of how to import the database, basically moving the database, like copy, dump, or call it what you want, to the Docker's data MySQL folder. You could also link additional folders if you would like from the container, but I'm using this is the easiest way currently that I like. This is basically one of two ways that I know how to import them without using any external software like DataGrip or something else. So that we have now moved the file, you can check. As you can see, we have it here. Where it was this one. This is a test database. It is outdated, old, and the project already is dismissed as it was for one of the videos. So let's clear it up. And now let's go to our Docker container bash, and let's log in into our not log in, but let's go to our default. This is default MySQL location where it stores the database files. So as you can see, our file is here sitting and waiting to be imported. And for the import, I'm going to use the newly created user, as it should have rights to import the file, but it shouldn't have rights to export the file. So let's import the file by using our newly created user into valtersit database. We will be importing the SQL db1 SQL. And here let's specify a password. As you can see, the file is old and it has some issues inside the file, so I will be clicking force to ignore these issues. And the file is now imported. Let's go into our MySQL server and show databases. As you can see, we have the command. As you can see, we have the valtersit MySQL database. Use valtersit. We are now using the database show tables, And these are all the tables that is inside the database, which contains the data based on the developer who has developed what data should go into which table. So let's select information from OC app config. This is a table that doesn't contain any sensitive information. These are the applications that were installed on the Nextcloud. So as you can see, there's a lot of information, and if we don't want to go through that all, we need something specific. Let's say I want to see the config key which is installed version. So let's select config key from OC app config, where config key equals installed version. So with this command we will select from this particular OC config table all the config keys that contains installed version, only config keys. As you can see, there's not much information that we want, but I want to know which config keys have this particular install version text. So let's change this with the star, and as you can see, now we know that files app IDs with this config key installed version has these versions. And for another example, I want to know which one has the version 1.19. So we can just change this 1.19.0 config value. And as you can see, we have selected all config values with 1.19. These app IDs have these config values. So this is one of the ways how to import the database, how to do the basic search. These are basic commands. Now let's do something interesting. Let's export the database. Wrong command, sorry. So now we want to export our database. We can do like so: dump -u root. In this scenario, we don't have our valtersit user the ability to do the export, so it has the root only has p, and we will have valtersit exported to valtersit backup.sql. Let me grab the root password. Always keep your passwords secure, don't share them, don't input them publicly. Only the thing that when we run the Docker container, we specify the password. It is not secure. It is better to use Docker secrets, but with Docker secrets also the user can easily access the password, so it is 50-50 shot. Oops, I grabbed the wrong root password. So let me rerun this command with the correct password. And if we take a look, we see that valtersit backup SQL. Here is our backup. So now let's log in into, let's clear this all up firstly. Oh, in Docker it doesn't work, okay. Let's log into our MySQL and drop database valtersit. Let's create database valtersit again. Database. And let's flush privileges. What I just did, I just dropped the database with all the tables and information, and now I have created it empty database, flush the privileges, and MySQL automatically will assign to that user what we created previously and to whom we granted the permissions. Why I did this? Because in next chapter I'm showing you how to import the database without going into your Docker environment. So here we can quit and exit to our VPS. Let's clear this one up. Now that we are out in our Linux VPS, we can now do following command. I will not import the db1 file this time. I'll import the one that we created, the backup. So now let's do docker exit -i MySQL container. Let's do MySQL -u root. Let's use root -p, and valtersit will be our database, and we will be importing valtersit backup SQL. Let me grab the root password. Let's click enter, and for some reasons it didn't want to comply. I didn't like because we didn't have the password. Okay, let's add the password. Password will be blurred out, and as you can see, it now has imported it. So let's do clear, and now let's log in to our Docker container bash and MySQL. Let's go with the root. Use valtersit, show tables, and as you can see, all the tables are inside our Docker container in our Docker MySQL. So this is another way how to import your Docker into your Docker, your SQL file. And there is an additional one way that we can also do. Let's go exit, clear, and let's do docker cp valtersit backup into MySQL container /backup. Let's do valtersit backup.sql. And if we go to docker exit -it MySQL container bash. Now, once we are in the container, if we do lsl, we see that our backup is here, and from here we can also import it into the MySQL. This would avoid the previously done when I did the cp into the linked folder. Now you have a question why I link the folders, because as I mentioned before, in case something happens to the MySQL instance, I have something from what to recover the data. If I can create, of course, Docker also the volumes where to store the data, but if I don't create them, I like this approach as well. If you are interested into how to create a MySQL cluster on a Docker, then I'm also creating that video, and soon it will be also released how to create MySQL cluster on a Docker and also on the Kubernetes. So please, if you are interested in it, click subscribe to not miss it. So for the Docker, Docker is much easier to maintain, and with Docker you can create a Docker cluster by cutting your expenses, because if you order several VPSs and you need some, let's say, test, dev environments, etc., in Docker it's much easier to create. There is a coming out video. If you subscribe, you will not miss it, definitely, in how to install and configure Docker and how to run multiple containers hosting the same software. And with Docker, you have so many benefits, actually, also in terms of flexibility. And when you are migrating to a different server from one hosting provider to different, let's say you assume you're moving from AWS to the Zone.eu, then with Docker it's much easier to move. You will not forget anything like your configurations and stuff like that, as you need to only drop a few files, use the same image, and that's it. Basically, it's easier to migrate. So yes, with Docker you have flexibility, and the Docker is now the modern tech that is used, and it's much easier for large projects, for small projects, etc. So it's easier to move, as I mentioned, and do the backups and testings and also debuggings and stuff like that. So if you are interested in Docker, don't forget to subscribe. If you're interested in other database types and stuff like that, don't forget to subscribe, as I will be covering a lot of things in upcoming videos. And don't forget to drink your coffee and check out our sponsored Zone.eu referral link to see what benefits you can get from using Zone.eu with our referral link. Thank you, and I see you in the next one.